what's amazing, and we'll look at all this because there's like this hype video and all of this. I don't know if the Rose BC. This is the standings. just stick with me. I understand it's unrivaled. Stick with me a moment. They are not in the playoffs as of yet. They're 5-6. Maybe they're trying to make a push, right? They're trying to get in. All right, so
timing, as always in sports, adds another layer to the analysis. Reese's return arrives with only 3 regular season games left and her team currently sitting just outside a secure playoff position. From a purely competitive standpoint, that scenario creates urgency. Every remaining matchup carries postseason implications, and adding a talented player late in the schedule could provide a boost if she integrates quickly. There's a reasonable, charitable interpretation that her absence earlier was necessary, whether for recovery, personal matters, or preparation, and that this is simply the earliest moment she felt ready to step back onto the court. Seen through that lens, the timing makes practical sense. Teams fighting for playoff spots often welcome reinforcements whenever they become available, regardless of how late in the season it is. If she can contribute immediately, even a small improvement could influence standings. Coaches frequently say that momentum at the end of a season can matter more than consistency earlier on, because late wins can propel a team into the postseason with confidence. Yet a more skeptical interpretation has also emerged among commentators. Some observers suggest that the timing aligns suspiciously well with the league's need for renewed attention. They argue that introducing a high-profile return just as ratings conversations intensify could be a calculated attempt to generate headlines. In this view, the comeback functions not only as a roster move but also as a publicity strategy designed to reignite interest during a critical stretch. It's important to note that both interpretations can coexist without either being definitively provable. Professional sports are complex ecosystems where competitive decisions and promotional strategies often overlap. A player can genuinely be ready to return at the same time that a league is eager to highlight her presence. The overlap doesn't necessarily imply manipulation, it can simply reflect the reality that timing in sports is rarely driven by a single motive. Still, the speculation itself shows how closely fans and analysts are watching. When audiences begin debating intent rather than just performance, it indicates that the stakes extend beyond wins and losses. People are paying attention not only to what happens on the court but also to why and when it happens. That level of scrutiny is common in leagues experiencing rapid growth, where every decision is interpreted as a signal about direction and priorities. Whether her return ultimately proves decisive for her team's playoff hopes or merely symbolic for the league's promotional efforts, the timing ensures that it will be analyzed from every possible angle. And in modern sports culture, that kind of attention can be as influential as any stat line.
Unrivaled ratings are still crap. Let's start with Friday night. We've got the Lunar Owls versus the Aces. They drew in 50,000 people in the 18 to 49 demographic, brought in 130,000 people altogether. All right, that looks like it's up a little bit, actually. Unrivaled Hive versus Breeze. Got 40,000 in the 18 to 49 demographic and brought in 150,000 fans. So they actually dropped in the ad revenue demographic. By the way, you're talking about 2 games that didn't total 300,000.
This is the backdrop against which Reese's comeback is unfolding, and it explains why the league appears eager to spotlight it so heavily. Promotional clips, countdown posts, and dramatic announcements have framed her return as a must-watch event, suggesting that her presence could inject new energy into the schedule. Marketing departments often rely on narratives like this because anticipation itself can attract viewers. If fans believe something significant is about to happen, they're more likely to tune in to see it for themselves. Yet the discussion has also revived scrutiny of past television metrics tied to her appearances. During a previous professional season with the Chicago Sky, one of her nationally tracked games reportedly drew around 80,000 viewers. At the time those figures circulated, analysts noted that the number ranked among the lowest-rated broadcasts of that particular season. Critics have pointed to that statistic as evidence that individual star recognition doesn't always guarantee large audiences. Supporters counter that single-game ratings can fluctuate widely based on scheduling, opponent, and broadcast competition, making it unfair to judge impact from one data point. The broader issue highlighted by that debate is how difficult it is to isolate a single cause for television performance. Ratings rarely hinge on one factor alone. Even athletes with massive followings can see lower numbers if their games air at inconvenient times or compete with major events in other sports. Media analysts frequently stress that viewership should be evaluated across multiple appearances rather than isolated snapshots. Still, perception tends to gravitate towards simple narratives. When a league promotes a player as a major draw, audiences expect ratings to reflect that label. If they don't, critics may argue the marketing overstated her influence. That dynamic can create pressure not only on the athlete but also on the organization promoting her. Expectations rise, and each broadcast becomes a referendum on whether the hype is justified. For the league, the stakes are clear. If Reese's return coincides with noticeable increases in viewership or engagement, it strengthens the argument that spotlighting her was a smart strategic move. If numbers remain unchanged, skeptics may claim it shows that no single player can dramatically shift audience trends. Either outcome will feed into ongoing debates about how much star power truly affects sports ratings. In other words, her comeback isn't just a basketball storyline. It's being treated, fairly or not, as a real-time experiment in audience behavior. And that makes every minute she spends on the court part of a much larger conversation than the scoreboard alone can capture.
Just pointing that out. Didn't total. So we come over here to Saturday, one game, the Phantom versus the Mist on True TV. 70,000 people watch this game. 30,000 people in the 18 to 49 demographic, 70,000 people tuned in to watch the contest. So you mean to tell me between three mother effing games, you only landed 350,000 viewers?
Now let's dig into the numbers that have fueled so much of this debate, because statistics often reveal patterns that hype alone can't conceal. On Friday night, the league scheduled a doubleheader designed to capture a wide audience across consecutive matchups. The first contest drew approximately 50,000 viewers within the coveted 18 to 49 demographic, the age range advertisers value most because it's considered the most responsive to marketing. Total viewership for that game reached around 130,000. For a brand new league still establishing itself, those figures aren't catastrophic, but they're also far from the explosive growth projections many supporters had envisioned when the season began. The second game that same evening told a similar story. While overall viewership climbed slightly to roughly 150,000, the key advertising demographic actually declined to about 40,000. That divergence matters because total audience size and target audience strength aren't always the same thing. Broad numbers can look stable on the surface, yet advertisers focus heavily on who is watching, not just how many. When the core demographic dips, it can signal challenges in maintaining sustained engagement among viewers considered most valuable for sponsorship revenue. When you combine the totals from both Friday broadcasts, the picture becomes clearer. 2 consecutive games together failed to reach 300,000 viewers. In isolation, that figure might not sound alarming, but expectations shape perception. This league entered the season positioned as an innovative addition to the women's basketball landscape, promoted as something that would capture fresh attention and energize the sport's off-season calendar. With that level of anticipation, audience metrics naturally become a measuring stick for whether the promise is matching reality. Critics have seized on those numbers as evidence that early excitement hasn't translated into consistent viewership momentum. Supporters counter that launch seasons often involve fluctuations while audiences gradually discover and adopt a new competition. Both arguments have merit. Historically, even successful leagues have experienced uneven ratings in their early phases before stabilizing. Still, investors and broadcasters tend to monitor trends closely, because audience trajectories can influence long-term funding, scheduling, and media partnerships. What intensifies scrutiny is the contrast between expectations and outcomes. Promotional campaigns suggested a fast-rising phenomenon that would command attention quickly. Instead, the ratings so far suggest a slower climb. That doesn't necessarily mean the concept is failing, it may simply mean growth is unfolding more gradually than predicted. But perception in sports media is shaped by comparison. When projections are ambitious, anything short of dramatic numbers can be framed as underperformance. This is why Reese's return has become such a focal point. In a landscape where viewership data is dissected weekly, any high-profile storyline is seen as a potential catalyst. Whether or not one player can truly shift ratings is a separate question, yet the hope that she might is clearly influencing how her comeback is being presented.
A lot more than Angel Reese to get those ratings up. I would guess. Again, like I said yesterday, I mean, she had a game last year where she got 80,000 viewers for the game. And by the way, it was the lowest game at that point of when I did the ratings well into the season. It was the lowest game of the year, ratings-wise. So, here she is. She's coming back to save Unrivaled. Has this got something to do with the CBA? I don't know. By the way, there may be a strike this weekend.
Stepping back from the numbers, timing debates, and promotional campaigns, the larger significance of this moment lies in what it reveals about the evolving relationship between star athletes and emerging leagues. New competitions often rely on recognizable figures to accelerate their growth curve. Established leagues spent decades building loyal audiences, startups don't have that luxury. They must generate interest quickly, and one of the fastest ways to do that is by spotlighting personalities who already command attention. That strategy, however, carries inherent risk. When a league leans heavily on a single name to drive engagement, it creates high expectations for immediate results. If those results don't materialize right away, critics may argue the reliance was misplaced. On the other hand, if interest surges, the decision is praised as visionary. Because outcomes can vary so widely, organizations walk a fine line between effective promotion and over-reliance on star narratives. Reese's comeback sits right at that intersection. To supporters, her return represents excitement, visibility, and the possibility of late-season drama. To skeptics, it looks like a high-stakes attempt to inject momentum into a season that hasn't yet reached the audience levels some predicted. Both perspectives reflect broader truths about sports entertainment. Perception shapes reality, and narratives often matter as much as statistics. Another factor worth considering is how rapidly public opinion can shift. A single standout performance could instantly change the tone of discussion, turning skepticism into praise. Conversely, a quiet stretch of games might reinforce doubts. Athletes in high-profile situations frequently experience this volatility. Their reputations can rise or fall based on a handful of performances, especially when expectations are amplified by marketing campaigns. For the league itself, the coming games function almost like a real-time case study. Executives, sponsors, and broadcasters will be watching closely to see whether attention increases, engagement rises, or conversations intensify. Those indicators can influence future decisions about scheduling, promotion, and investment. In that sense, the significance of her return extends beyond standings. It feeds directly into strategic planning. Ultimately, what happens next will determine how this chapter is remembered. If the final stretch delivers excitement, competitive drama, and increased interest, the narrative will likely shift toward success. If it doesn't, the debates now unfolding will only grow louder. Either way, one thing is certain: the spotlight is firmly fixed, and every moment from here on out will be measured not just by points on the board, but by the reaction they generate far beyond the arena.
Reese looks like she's coming back with 3 games to play. Okay. I mean, I'm not sure what that's going to do for you, but all right. Okay. Here we are. She's back. She's back. Praise baby Jesus.
If Friday's results raised concerns, Saturday's figures intensified them. That evening featured a single broadcast matchup rather than a doubleheader, theoretically concentrating the audience instead of splitting it. Yet the total viewership reached only about 70,000, with roughly 30,000 falling into the prime advertising demographic. From a statistical standpoint, that's a modest turnout for a nationally televised sporting event, particularly one airing on a weekend night when more viewers are typically available. When analysts add together the approximate totals from Friday and Saturday, the combined audience across 3 games lands around 350,000. Context is crucial here. In the broader ecosystem of televised sports, that number isn't unprecedentedly low. Many niche competitions draw similar figures. However, comparisons often shape narratives more than raw totals do. Commentators have pointed out that even an average regular season game in the WNBA can sometimes surpass those numbers, depending on matchup and broadcast slot. That comparison has fueled claims that the new league's early viewership hasn't yet matched the level of attention some predicted. Of course, ratings are influenced by numerous factors beyond star presence. Scheduling conflicts with other sporting events, time slots, regional broadcast availability, and competing entertainment options all affect audience size. A Saturday night broadcast, for example, may compete with major league games, concerts, or social events that pull viewers away from television screens. Analysts who specialize in media metrics caution against drawing sweeping conclusions from a small set of broadcasts, noting that trends usually become meaningful only over longer stretches. Still, perception often forms quickly in the modern media environment. When numbers circulate online, they're frequently interpreted without full context, turning into headlines or viral talking points. That dynamic can shape public opinion before analysts have time to provide deeper explanations. In this case, the narrative emerging among critics is that the league's audience growth hasn't yet reached the scale many anticipated when it launched. Another factor complicating the discussion is expectation management. When a new sports property is introduced with bold claims about revolutionizing its space, the public tends to evaluate it against that promise. If early results appear modest, observers may frame them as disappointment rather than as part of a gradual growth curve. Supporters argue that patience is essential, pointing out that even well-established leagues took years to build consistent audiences. Regardless of interpretation, the numbers have undeniably intensified attention on upcoming games. Every broadcast now carries added significance because viewers and analysts alike are watching to see whether the trend changes. In that environment, any major storyline, especially the return of a widely recognized player, becomes more than just a roster update. It becomes a test case for whether star power can translate into measurable audience shifts.